Okay, good morning. Moving from me to we. Maybe I should warn you beforehand. I'm an organizational psychologist, so I'm pretty much biased in that sense, is that I believe that organizations are about people. And that basic notion of starting from the belief that people make the organizations, that people are the organizations, I think if you really think through it and not just put it in some kind of an annual report, makes a huge difference. So the theme in that sense is really related to my own research. But I'm not going to talk so much about my own research. What I do want to do is to give you 5 key principles about how can you, if you go home and you go to your organization, what can change the way that you look at HR, what can change the way you look at leadership, that can change the way you look at culture. Because if you really do this, it will change things within your organization. I'm not going to pretend that these 5 principles are the 5 principles, because I think there is more. And there are colleagues in the hall, and then they will just probably hit me if I would say, like, this is it. But I do think that these are important, and you will see them coming back throughout the day. I think the basic assumption is that if you sort of like go into an organization, or if you go into a world where globalization is a role, where knowledge is important, where service is important, you have to look at people. And the challenge, what I see in a lot of organizations, is that it seems to be more about processes, it seems to be more about efficiency, and sometimes in this whole process of downsizing and making things easier efficiently, we forget that there are still the people who need to do the core of the work. And that brings me to the first principle. Happiness results in performance. Now you all know, if you have a goal, you reach your goal, you feel good, right? You're happy. You got your promotion. You got an extra salary. You got whatever. You run a marathon in New York. But you also know that after a while, that feeling of happiness goes away. And this is what we know. It just is temporary. Now, does it give a good feeling to do something that is good, that is great? Absolutely. Is it great for a team to together have a successful event like this, for example? Of course. But the other way is just as true. And because the other way means, wait a minute, I want people to bring out the best in themselves. How do I do that? Can I do it if I have depressed people? Or maybe people who are just motivated because somebody told them so? I don't think so. So that is why when we look at research the past few years, you see a continuing more and more attention for, wait a minute, what does it bring to people when they are in a positive mood? What does it bring to an organization if they sort of say, like, wait a minute, I think we should have something in place, whatever that is, that gives people a good feeling. Because that good feeling may actually be helpful. Now, of course, you are here at RSM, and we are a university. That means we are very much about evidence-based management. So, my first piece of evidence comes from a meta-analysis from 2005. And for those of you for whom like the school is long ago, a meta-analysis in essence means that we throw all together all kind of studies on a topic, and then we look at the common denominator. And of course, the larger the sample we have, the more trust we can have in the results. Because country, sample, organization, they all drop away. Now this meta-analysis of 2005 basically shows that people who feel more positive about themselves, have a stronger well-being, actually also look more positive to others. They are more pro-social, they actually feel physically better, they are better at negotiations, and most importantly, they're more creative in problem solving. Because what does it do? If you have a positive feeling, then it opens up things. It's like, you have one side, you can say like, okay, depressed people, we sometimes say, have a really good clear how the reality really looks like, because they know where the faults are. Okay, but does that really build? I don't think so, because you want to look at possibilities. So if you want to look at possibilities, you need this positive sense for people. So this is the first thing. Look at your organization, look at your culture, and see what can you do to give the people in your organization a good feeling. Well, that brings me to the next principle. Motivate through empowerment. The whole idea behind that is that most of us are highly skilled, highly educated persons. We know our job. We know what we need to do. What we need is an organization culture, a leader, that tells us, I give you the trust, I give you the autonomy, I give you the possibilities to really make that happen. And that is where empowerment is so important. In my own research, and I study servant leadership, empowerment is a key concept. And when I look at the data, constantly I see that the strongest driving factor of what kind of, and whether it comes job dissatisfaction, or organizational citizenship behavior, or actual performance, is this sense of empowerment. And of course, it's also about coaching, it's about allowing people to use their skills. Just to introduce that, I found another meta-analysis here. First of all, just to continue on the first part, we had a big meta-analysis showing that performance and job satisfaction are related. I'm not going to go into causality stuff, but at least they're related. But the more recent one, I thought that was very important. They studied whether this relationship between people who feel good about their work and their performance, whether there's something in the environment which actually sort of like strengthens that or diminishes that. And what happened? It's autonomy which became the most important factor in that study. In other words, if you want to have an organization where people feel good, to reach performance, you need to create and give them a sense of autonomy. Let's go to leader, because we haven't talked about the leader yet. Because that's, of course, reality in most organizations. We have hierarchical structures. We have people who have more or less power. The question is, how do we want that person to relate? How do we want that person to basically are? And there you see that the most recent research is going towards that leadership, effective leadership, comes with a sense of humility. Now, humility, and in Dutch it would be nederigheid, is something that gives you, and I'm saying it in Dutch, sort of like, I do this like, because on purpose, because it gives you a sense of, I don't want that, right? I am not smaller. But that's not what humility is about. Humility is actually about being strong and confident in yourself, but also knowing what you can do and what you cannot do. The symbol that you see here is actually an African symbol, which is about strength and humility. And these combination, you can see, and also more research from several people who are studying humility as leadership, see is very important. Because now there is an acknowledgement that you are a role model. And there is one thing you have to be aware of as in the leadership position, and those of you who are higher up know this. People look at you. So how your behavior, what you're doing, that's actually being copied. Because if that guy does it like this, and he's the CEO, that's what I need to do, right? So imagine the difference between somebody who is like narcissistic, this is me, and I know everything, and I don't listen to you guys. And somebody says like, I know what I want, I know what the organ is about, but I also know I can't do it alone. I know that I can look in the mirror and see the strengths, and I can see the weaknesses. This is a difficult one for most of us, to really see both. Some of us are easier about, flogging ourselves, saying, well, I know what's wrong with me. And others are very good about, this is what I'm good at. Humility is about the combination. It's about also less me, more the other, right? That is what humility is about. And it's also about valuing the other person. The egalitarian beliefs means that even though I may be like a higher hierarchical position, I may have more responsibility, that doesn't mean that other people in the organization have less value. We did a study also about this in terms of the servant leadership, and that was part of the PhD project from Milton Souza. And we studied whether empowerment, humility, and hierarchy are related in their effectiveness. And this study in essence shows that the effectiveness of humility increases and has more power to enhance the effect of empowerment the higher you go up in the organizations. In other words, as we rise up in the organization and we want to stay effective, it might be worthwhile to look at humility. Now, of course, it's not just about your leader, it's also about your colleagues. And I know a few years ago, a friend of ours who has been doing like a lot of downsizing because that's the industry he is in, and I asked him, how can you keep people motivated? And basically he says like, well, what I do, I put a lot of attention to the team of the people that are left. And it made perfect sense to me. Because if there is one thing we need, we have basic needs as individuals. We have a need to feel competent. We have a need to be autonomous. We dealt with that. But you have just as much a great need to feel connected to other people. I did several studies and seeing what are the most important needs that people are when it comes to your general sense of I have a good life. And here it's the sense of connectedness to others that's apparently most driving. So the one thing that I would really encourage here is to, if you build an organization, don't forget it's something that people do together and to enhance that. And just to illustrate that, I have taken a study which is about social support and work stress. And here it's about perceived support. What does it do? Now remember, it says perceived social support. It's not so much whether you actually get it, but whether you feel you can have access to it if you need to. And there you see that, and not surprisingly, having this sense of I can relate to people gives you less stress, more job satisfaction. If you look at, for example, the Gallup survey on engagement, one of the key questions is, do I have a best friend at work? That is so important for us as individuals, as people. And the last thing is also surprising me, because that was actually the strongest effect. The social support that we experience from others helps us to know what we need to do. Because, of course, even though I said we are good at our job, we are highly educated, there is still the question, so what am I going to do actually at my work? That is where your social environment comes. Final principle, and in a sense I would almost make it the first principle, because it's to me that it's on respect. And this is an under-researched area, actually, interestingly enough. And on the other hand, who does not want to be respected, right? And if you look at the literature, and it's more theoretically than actually really empirical science at this moment, you can differentiate between two things. The first is be respected for who you are as a human being, just because you are. And can you imagine, can you just take a moment what would happen if somebody comes to you in your office, or somebody sends you an email, and it pisses you off. And then you say, and before you start to react, before you send the send button on that email that you have been sending and writing to really get everything out of the way, you're thinking, wait a minute, that person at the other side is also a human being. And at least, even though I disagree, that's not the issue, you can disagree and you can tell him, will I say it this way? Do I still respect that as a person? I think that's very important. And the second part is that we want to be respected for what we are doing. This is the recognition part. We talk about motivating people, people like recognition. And of course it's different in different cultures. We are here in Europe, we wouldn't do it like the Americans are doing with high flying and a lot of things and screaming and that sort of things. Wouldn't work, right? But it doesn't mean you don't want to be recognized. Just 2 days ago, I came across this paper from actually 2 former colleagues of us here at RSM. And they did something where I thought was interesting, because they were talking about what they called respectful inquiry. And they make a great case that if you want to be successful as a leader, if you want to do that respect, some key element means how do you talk with other people? And they make it point to just like, if you want to address the needs of the others, ask open questions, ask many questions, and have attentive listening in it. And I think this is so important. If you would, be in an open program where I'm also in, this is what we're also doing. Because I think, and I know that the higher you go up in the organization, the more important it becomes to be a listener and not a talker. To sum up, to kick off this day, I have to introduce to you 5 key principles to move from we to we. First of all, look at the well-being of the people in your organization, because if they feel good about themselves, they will open up, they will be more social, they will be more creative. Give them the room, the possibilities, the autonomy to really create the work where they're good at. Of course, we need to all go in one direction, that goes without saying, but still. And then make sure that you have a certain sense of strength in yourself, confidence, but also know that you don't know everything, and that you have strengths, but you have also things you don't know. Think about creating a culture where you do things together, so really like a team-based working becomes more and more important. And finally, I think it's very important that as a leader, as you go higher up, you should stop talking and start listening. Thank you.